Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I would have expected even Senator Sifuna to take note that I have worn an orange tie, and as the SGO of ODM, he should at least be fair today, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't know, we need in our standing orders, when the chair and the committee rejects a bill, what becomes of it? But let me give my Solomonic injection to this conversation, Mr. Speaker, by saying, Mr. Speaker, I know today in the afternoon you had a communication where we are going for mediation under Division of Revenue. Mr. Speaker, what we are even requesting for counties is modest. It is only 415 billion, Mr. Speaker, against 4.2 trillion budget. While least we accept that there are challenges with running of counties, including of wastage of resources and corruption, that should not be a reason why we need to deny counties the money, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, this bicameral has come a long way from 2010 to now. I know, Mr. Speaker, I didn't see the need of this bill because the Constitution and legal precedents, even on petition number 3 of the Senate Republic in 2013 on division of revenue, was pronounced itself as Supreme Court, that Senate must be part of budget-making process because it is there in the Constitution. From the word go, I didn't see the need why we should have this legislative proposal, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, this legislative proposal has been made in a manner likely to make Senate become a rubber stamp of the lower house, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, Senate in its rightful place should and must be respected, Mr. Speaker. We are not an appendage of the National Assembly or any other entity, Mr. Speaker. We are elected by the people. We are entrenched in the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the law, when a bill comes to the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker, the life of a bill as it is in the Constitution 2010, if it originates in the 8th House, if it is passed in the 8th House with amendments, Mr. Speaker, it goes for mediation. I don't see the reason why we introduce, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in that note, I want to celebrate my successor, Senator Cherargei, that is now coming of age. Because if you remember my era, I used to shoot straight from the hip. And that is why by the 3rd year, as the Senate jailer chairperson, I was de-whipped. Because if you look at my history, and the answer can bear witness, my prowess in running the JLAC in the last session, even Senator Manzo and yourself, even the JLAC at that time, and I know the chair of JLAC, Senator Cheptumo, was there, and we worked closely. I want to encourage him. Being a chair of JLAC is not easy sometimes, because even we went ahead and investigated enforced disappearance and extrajudicial killings, Mr. Speaker. So it is not, but I want to thank the Senate JLAC chairman and the committee for providing guidance. And this is leadership. This is now leadership. And we will take cue on the report of the committee and reject this bill in totality, in total. I don't know whether there is such a name in English. In total, we shall reject this bill, Mr. Speaker. Because I'm happy, at least with the secretariat that we have, Mr. Speaker. And allow me, Mr. Speaker, to celebrate, because these are our finest drafters and legislative drafters in this House. Dr. Johnson Okello, Director of Legal Services, Mr. Speaker, for being elected the President of the Multinational Association of Legislative Council, the first African jurist to sit. That body was formed 40 years ago, Mr. Speaker. But we have Dr. Johnson Okello, our Director of Legal Services, who holds PhD in law and has practiced law or legal practice for over 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. I know where he comes from. Having education is not a problem. But we celebrate him, Mr. Speaker. For us who have interacted with Dr. Johnson Okello, Director of Legal Services of the Senate, he is a man of immense knowledge and wisdom and guidance at any given opportunity. So, Mr. Speaker, allow me to celebrate him, wish him well, as he serves for the next 2 years as the president of the Multinational Association of Legislative Council. Mr. Speaker, by merit, these are people who should be occupying the highest offices in the land if we are using meritocracy as a yardstick. But since we use other measurements, Mr. Speaker, like night running and other issues, then, Mr. Speaker, it's always a complicated story altogether, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, allow me to make 5 comments. And thank you also, Mr. Speaker, and your office for supporting our secretariat. We are saying, Mr. Speaker, our secretariat are the best. Dr. Johnson Okello has led, and I know a number of secretariat from our clerk, Mr. Nyekenye, and the deputies and the table office here, Mr. Speaker. We always celebrate and have tremendous respect, Mr. Speaker, to all our staff, from even the gatemen, from the people who serve us tea and food, all our staff, even the sergeant-at-arms are doing a tremendous. And I know these are some total, Mr. Speaker, of what you are doing in terms of leadership of the Senate and the Parliament of Kenya. But also, you should not also gag us when we have also reservations on some of the services in the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when you look at clause number 7, and Mr. Speaker, how can you say, this is Article 118 on public participation. How can you say if one house has sold a public participation, the other house should not hold? It is a constitutional requirement that public participation by members of public must be done. Because that is what we get the second opinion, even on finance bill now, Mr. Speaker. Public participation is mandatory. Because you saw there were advisors that were being paid 1 billion. But the only advice they gave us was to add 10 shillings to a loaf of bread, Mr. Speaker, which is causing you and cry, Mr. Speaker. That is why we need to go back to the people so that they do public participation. It is in bad faith to say if National Assembly has all our public participation, we should not all our public participation. We have a symbiotic relationship. We are distinct, but we must do the job. If it is National Assembly, let Senate do public participation, let the National Assembly do public participation. I remember, Mr. Speaker, even on the sugar bill that is under mediation. When National Assembly did public participation, they didn't see slum areas. What we should be proposing is that if a National Assembly has public participation in Makueni, then now Senate can do it in Siaya, for example, or they do it in Nairobi, we do it in Nandi, we do it in Figa, Mr. Speaker, and I think or Bomet, or even Meru, so that we can complement each other, but it's not a competition, Mr. Speaker. So on this one, on the public participation, Mr. Speaker, this is the fall flat on its face and must fall by their own sword, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have seen in this bill, Mr. Speaker, on the joint sitting, why would you call us joint? You know the South Africa Parliament, Mr. Speaker, when they have a presidential address, SONA, South Africa National Address, they use joint sitting rules. Why are you calling us for a sitting rule, for a joint sitting, and let's say you use National Assembly, standing orders, and then you make you the speaker to be like deputy speaker of a National Assembly speaker? Mr. Speaker, this bill has been drafted with an intention to demean and disparage and eradicate the standing of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is why as a Senate we can pride ourselves. So the first time we have said we want money for counties 415 billion, Mr. Speaker. And we stand by that. It will not change anytime soon. But the other day when they were handling issue of fertilizer, they could not even rise up to the occasion and put the wrongs into right, Mr. Speaker. Even in the process that under one care, I don't want to revisit, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know this issue of county government, it does not concern the issue of under section on the certificate of joint resolution. I think this is something we canvass in the Supreme Court in our matter, where we said we must have a concurrence signed by the second house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on clause number 10, whenever the Speaker of the second house disagrees with the question raised and contemplated, the Speaker backs to the Speaker of the originating house, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my worry is on clause 10.3. If the originating Speaker causes the bill to be modified to accommodate the observations of the Speaker of the second house. So now we have removed legislation from members of Parliament to the two speakers. Because now that is dangerous. This can create draconian laws. Because if the speakers will modify the bill and give the House. They are also human beings. They can mislead the country and create even draconian laws, Mr. Speaker. Because if we allow you, Mr. Speaker, we know you are a person of Solomonic organized, Mr. Speaker. And that is why we always have tremendous respect to the Speaker. But the law does not envisage a Speaker or speakers to be part of lawmaking process, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of clause number 12, the relevant departmental committee of the Assembly or member to be at liberty to adopt the bill and the bill be deemed to have originated the pursuant to the standing Article 109(5) of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to report to this House, there are many bills that National Assembly has become a graveyard of our bills. So, Speaker, under Article 110(3), they always refer our bills to the Parliamentary Budget Office and their departmental committees and declare the bill that originated from the Senate as money bill. And therefore, it should not originate from the Senate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have lost many bills, even amendment. I made an amendment, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of the issues of diaspora. The National Assembly are telling me that it is not a function of the Senate. So I'm asking, a county like Busia is bordering Uganda. Does it mean it cannot be part of the international community or affected by international law? County like Mombasa is bordering other countries like Turkana, Kajiado. Does it mean it cannot be affected by the international law, Mr. Speaker? So, Mr. Speaker, on this one, clause number 12(3), we need to be careful because members will be struggling hard to develop bill, Mr. Speaker. You approve. When it goes, they send it and declare money bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, number 50 point, or shall appoint its members of the mediation. I think that is straightforward, Mr. Speaker, because in any case, like the way you did today, Mr. Speaker, like the way you did today, is just a procedure that the Constitution has provided. Clause number 16, I'll be very quick. A committee of one House with the written permission of the Speakers of the Senate and National Assembly or other to deliberate on matters of mutual interest and concern. Mr. Speaker, my worry is on the clause 16(4). The National Assembly and the Senate shall, upon commencement of this act, prescribe under their respective standing orders for the joint rules for the conduct of the sitting. Mr. Speaker, the Houses may on motion prescribe rules. And then it goes, clause number 17. At any joint sitting of the Houses, the standing orders of the National Assembly shall apply with such modification and variation as of the Speaker of National Assembly may consider necessary or appropriate. So we can have a joint sitting of State of the Nation address. But what this law tells us, that the standing orders shall apply belong to National Assembly. This is dangerous. And it is a joint sitting. I have used an example of Parliament of South Africa. Whenever they have a joint sitting through SONA, they always join rules, Mr. Speaker. So what is the purpose of clause 17? It is to demean us, to make us like MCS, Mr. Speaker, which we should not allow. I'm not saying MCS are lesser, but the standard of Senate is a bit high, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, clause 17(3), the Speakers of the Houses of Parliament shall enforce any directions given during a joint sitting in relation to the conduct of member of Parliament in accordance with the application provision of the National Assembly standing orders. Mr. Speaker, you heard the other day, this is in the public record. When I questioned about the Bunge Towers, the Speaker of the lower house wanted to refer me to the Committee of Powers and Privileges. So if the joint sitting was a prime, Mr. Speaker, you as truly could have been crucified like Jesus Christ. Yet I'm doing the Lord's work or pointing out that does not work, Mr. Speaker. Like, for example, when we are using the VIP lift, you meet with tea, tissue papers, chapatis on your way, yet it has been written VIP lift, Mr. Speaker. So whenever we point out how would have been crucified, is Speaker Moses Wetangula, because I questioned and he said that I cannot access certificate of occupation because simply I am nobody. So, Speaker, I would be in problems, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, clause number 18, the Speakers of the Houses of Parliament may in consultation with leaders of majority party and minority arrange for a joint sitting for purposes of address, which is okay. It is in our standing orders. I don't know why it is here. Yet our standing orders said if we want anybody, including the president, to address this house, it is the prerogative of the minority side and majority side to agree. So why are we becoming prescriptive? Mr. Speaker, lastly, on public participation, clause number 19, I think I agree with the chair of JLAC. This is violation of Article 118 on public participation. I think we are considering public participation bill, Mr. Speaker. Failure to views during the is not invalid. Mr. Speaker, how can we say, Mr. Speaker, you remember Kiambu, the case of Kiambu CC, Mr. Speaker, and others were taken to court. In the finance bill of 2013, the Kiambu County Executive then did not do public participation. For the first time, a ruling was made. Mr. Speaker, can you call the Deputy Speaker out of order for distracting me while I'm submitting? Or for consulting loudly. Mr. Speaker,
what's your point of order, Senator Kaduri?
No, I forgive Senator Cherargei. He's my junior, so proceed, Senator Cherargei.
That's your point of order.
Deputy Speaker, you're out of order. Cherargei, proceed.
The Deputy Speaker, I'm giving him instant justice the way he does. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of, we need to be careful on this issue of public participation. I was using the case of Kiambu case in 2013, where they did public finance bill without public participation. The courts have made themselves clear. How can you say here, the Committee of Parliament shall consider the views from the participating, but you go ahead and say it is not an offense not to consider? It's self-defeating. There is a precedent that has been set in place, Mr. Speaker. So, Speaker, this bill, I agree with you and your committee that this bill does not hold any water, Mr. Speaker. We cannot be part. Mr. Speaker, in bicameral parliament like in the US, and I want to encourage my members of this House that in my constitutional amendment bill of 2024, I have tried and distinguished the role of bicameral. That Senate should be given the same powers as the Senate of the US, where impeachment is confirmed, appointments of the president, including cabinet, and many other decisions, Mr. Speaker. In fact, for example, why would the war emergency be declared by National Assembly? It should be by Parliament, because that's a serious issue that affects even counties, Mr. Speaker. On this bicameral issue, I agree with you and your committee that, in fact, in the second reading, we reject this bill in totality, let it go to mediation, but I don't see why we should prescribe something that is already in place, Mr. Speaker, going into the future, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say, I know, Mr. Speaker, on the issue of bicameral, I'm happy that some of the House leadership members are in US with the President. They should visit the Congress and the Senate and learn a few things of bicameral. Because especially the majority leader of National Assembly, because I heard him talking the other day on division of revenue, can he take a time off to learn how bicameral system operates, so that before you start fighting the other House, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure Senator Sifuna, the reason some of us are invited to Mogotio for goat eating is because we are the real people who plan many things that run around in this country. Others are just, we travel to those countries, Senator Sifuna, and us, we have even interest in those countries, so you don't need to travel to see many things. It is better to go to Mogotio, and you should be happy that I always go to Mogotio because I save the public money, unlike when I'm traveling abroad. That's another issue is trying to bring, Mr. Speaker, that you should rule Senator Sifuna out of order. I have never used a private jet, unless other people have used, but I have never used, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you need to protect me. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, let us take the position you have taken. Mr. Speaker, let us take the position you have taken and reject this bill in totality. Thank you very much, and I support.
Senator Cherargei, thank you very much. Senator Manzo Kitonga.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,